1 2 1 2, checking the sound. Is it there? 1 2 1 2. Great. So good morning. And so good morning. Good morning, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. And we're about to start this event of the National Platform on Resilience and Cohesion. So this event is dedicated today to such issues related to special international tribunal, Russia, what should we know? And this is like a public discussion. In some way can call it a discussion where we will try to find answers for different questions, we have in our society today when it comes to preparation of the tribunal. Why this tribunal for Russian aggression? Why is this not other formats? So what dynamics do we have today in that direction? My name is Oleh Vesnianka. I would like to pass the floor to Ms. Artur Gebel, the head of political department of the EU delegation to Ukraine. So this initiative is actually implemented with the support of the European Union, and this support is really immensely valuable. We can't exaggerate. We can't exaggerate the value of that support. So please. Thank you so much. And I will use English if it's possible. I speak Ukrainian, but I think that would be easier for you just to understand me. And we have, by the way, the Zoom streaming. We have simultaneous interpretation, so you can find your channel. It's really hard for me, yeah. So I really don't want to miss something.
Thank you very much again for inviting us. Indeed, we are very happy that we can support this initiative and as a youth support in general, all the efforts on accountability. And let me start with the obvious thing, but to state it again, that we, of course, are very much supporting all the accountability efforts. We think that all victims of Russian war of aggression deserve justice and reparation, and of course, perpetrators needs to be held accountable. The question is, of course, how to do it, and I understand this today event might also help us to understand a bit better how effectively to do it. Let me also mention a bit how we already support the efforts in general on all the accountability efforts in Ukraine. So we have a number of measures. We are assisting our prosecutor office in Ukraine, which is present here, through our different instruments. We are also storing and preserving evidences, or helping storing and preserve evidences. We change a mandate a number of our institutions, EU advisory mission, EU Just. Those are quite kind of important changes of the mandate. We are taking part in joint investigation teams with member states, a number of those teams. And there is, for example, a group, Atrocity Crimes Advisory Group, EU, US, UK, which was created, which is also helping to the effort of accountability. This is all, of course, relates to accountability for so-called international crimes, so war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide, which is, as we understand, under firm, let's say, mandate and jurisdiction internationally of ICC, International Crime Court, exactly. So this is one thing, and we support those efforts, and we think that ICC role needs to be preserved as a main body for all these crimes. And we are supporting also, I forgot to mention, ICC, let's say bilateral as the EU as well, in those efforts. But Then we go to the, let's say, main topic of discussion of this conference today, which is the crime of aggression. And I must start with also the statement that we don't have yet, a clear EU position on the way forward with the special tribunal. So the reflection in the EU is ongoing. Excuse me. The reflection in the EU is ongoing. As you might know, in October, we had the European Council, which tasked our services, mainly Commission and European External Action Service, to come with a plan how to do it effectively. So this is the highest for the EU level possible tasking, and we hope that this work will go as quickly as possible. But of course, the question how to do it effectively is very important, because it's basically very interesting, also legal but intellectual challenge. I think how to make it happen. So as we understand it, crimes of aggression is not under crimes of aggression in Ukraine. Let's be precise. It's not under ICC jurisdiction because Russia is not a state partner of Rome Statute. So we cannot use the ICC in this case. By the way, Ukraine didn't ratify neither the Rome Statute, but that's another issue. So we have few, let's say, options on the table. And those options are, as we see it, international tribunal, which should be mandated by UN Security Council resolution, which is very unlikely for obvious reasons of a veto. And then another option is a hybrid tribunal with national and international components under UN resolution, but not necessarily Security Council, but General Assembly resolution, all in all. And there are also a few options. But in all this, just to flag it as we understand it, and again, I stress the reflection in the EU is ongoing, so I don't have any final EU position, is that probably the hybrid tribunal might be the most realistic option in let's say, at the end of the day. We have also some proposals already on the table by one of our member states, the Netherlands, in the interim prosecutorial office, which can be created as a first step. And we have some examples in the past of this, like for Kosovo. So we have also some experience understanding. And then this hybrid special tribunal, which should be on a delegated jurisdiction under Ukrainian law with international elements. Could be, certainly should be. So judging staff could be international, but under Ukrainian law and delegated jurisdiction. That seems to be something that more or less might be doable, but again, I think your UN conference might discuss this and other options in detail. I'm just trying to put on the table what we are reflecting on also in the EU, how to make it, let's say, effective. Important things, as we see it, is the very strong, as much as possible, international support for any tribunal of this kind. So that's why I think it takes also time to gather the support to make sure that we have as many states around the table supporting this tribunal. Then I mentioned already that we should not somehow undermine the jurisdiction of ICC by creating this tribunal, which is also, I think, quite an important issue. And then, of course, we as much as possible coordinate better our efforts of all the states. So I think that's the three elements I mentioned in general as for the reflection of the tribunal. So with this, let me just say that it's a very timely event, I think. We are happy to support it. Again, we support very much all these efforts. The EU is highly on this, as I mentioned, from the highest possible levels. We have all the tasking, and I think this work will go pretty smoothly. And yeah, I hope that this discussion will be very useful on this one. And last but not least, of course, important signal also for Ukraine. I'm here, I understand all the sensitivities, but any harmonization of Ukrainian legislation with international standards, including possible ratification of Rome Statute, might also be a very good and timely signal to, let's say, to force this or to kind of to strengthen those efforts on the tribunal. But this is only just to finish and to to add to this one. So again, thank you very much. I hope I wish you all very fruitful, let's say, discussion and efforts, and many thanks. Дуже дякую.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Gebel, for these very important messages, very eloquent messages, and for these considerations on what is the best form of the tribunal. How can we hold Russians accountable for their aggression in Ukraine? And I just want to add from me that our national platform, well, it's not something new for us why we take this issue. So restoring justice, this is about national resilience. They go shoulder to shoulder. So social resilience, national resilience, we take care of that now, our colleagues. This is our domain, our realm. So without solving specific issues, if we project this situation, we try to forecast it, you know, when we speak, we need resilient and stable peace. Without actual prosecution, without holding Russia accountable, it's impossible. This case, if we can call it a case, this case is important not just for Ukraine. To me, it seems that it is important for this part of Europe, European continent, for global practices, for future, let's say, of judiciary system. This is a very important precedent in the 21st century. And this is also a precedent, the process of search. And what is the most adequate solution? How can we search it? What is the most adequate response on how to restore justice? And that's what we will talk about during our expert public discussion. So we have two panels today. The first panel will be moderated by Ms. Olha Vesnianka. She's a human rights activist, Council of Europe consultant, and she is involved in the media and public sector. We have very, very prominent experts as always, and I'm so happy to see other experts here and representatives of the civic society and MPs of Ukrainian Parliament. We will have also our colleagues online with us, joining us in the Zoom, and also from other European states who actually search for these models and try to find like the best practices, how this could be potentially implemented. I just want to add, when I speak of international tribunal, Russian aggression, in Ukrainian society, a lot of general stuff is known to people, you know, and mostly our citizens not always can understand the difference when it comes to International UN Court, then the Hague Court, Rome Statute, and so on. So for them, it's like it's a little bit confusing for them. We'll try to rationalize these approaches today and these notions, and we'll try to explain basically how Ukraine should move forward, what support it can get, and what is the dynamics of the process today. And we have representatives of the presidential office with us. Yes, and they, let's say, keep an eye on these trends. And I think that such consolidation of stakeholders, various stakeholders, and civic society organizations, human rights organizations, MPs are here as well, government is with us, of course, MFA, presidential office. So this synergy is very, very important for us to promote this agenda. And I'd like to pass the floor to Ms. Olga, our moderator. She'll moderate the first panel. The second panel will mostly talk to human rights activists, NGOs, about the experience of preparation and cooperation in promoting this idea. Thank you. I'm so grateful to Ms. Yulia Dyshenko. Artur, I'm grateful to you as well, if I do pronounce your name correctly. And I'm grateful to all the community of national platform of resilience and cohesion. And by the way, it's really interesting. As far as I know, Mr. Lyatyshenko is very aware of what mediation is. She's an expert in that. What is happening right now, it looks like a certain talk on justice, actual justice, when it comes to Russian aggression against Ukraine. Not in Ukraine, but against Ukraine. And in today's conversation, it adds like another dimension. And the NATO General Assembly resolution and the decision made in Netherlands on the crime, on the MH17 crash. By the way, on the board we have our colleague from Netherlands. So she dedicated 17 years of her life to Amnesty International. And it's really good that we have the representative of the presidential office today with us. So establishment of this international special tribunal is Ukraine's initiative of President of Ukraine. And together with the NGOs, we have a chance to work with a working group established by the decree of the President of Ukraine on September 22nd. And today's participants are in this council, the members of it, both offline and online. That is why I pass the floor. I don't pass the floor, but let's say I summon the first participant, the one who knows an answer. It's really good that we have ICC functioning, doing its job. We don't have so much time. This is quite luxury for us today, but Mr. Hibal, your words were very important today. Thank you. And it sounds like some of the areas and aspects that you mentioned on tribunal, well, I don't represent any state institution, so personally I think that hybrid tribunal, this is my personal opinion, hybrid tribunal, we have this example, we have the John Goldstone support. He is the former judge on Yugoslavia. Okay, let's not say Yugoslavia, but Balkan states. I like that word. And Rwanda has certain experience. And it sounds really well. As a person who once advocated together with my colleagues the ratification of Rome Statute, yeah. So what you say is really important. It's really important for us all to hear that. So the first one will be online. The MFA Special Mission Ambassador Anton Korynevych, he's with us online today. Okay, so please, how do you see the influence of the recent decisions? I won't try to say that Assembly's decisions is something to execute. The judicial decisions where the Russia is claimed as aggressor, this is the decision made in Netherlands in MH17. After New York, after the Netherlands meeting, so the key question, how shall the ICC work? What shall it do? Won't the ICC obstruct, sorry for my smile, won't it obstruct the activity of ICC? So good morning, dear colleagues, and I do hope that connection is okay and it's stable. So I'm so grateful for this opportunity to join this event, and I do think it's really important, as any discussion related to accountability for international crimes, of course, it's one of the key topics for our society, and that is why all our joint efforts, our consolidated efforts, everything we can do actually to achieve these results, I think that we should all together implement these efforts and, of course, finalize this process. So, first of all, I would like to respond to something mentioned by Ms. Olga, and maybe more from the standpoint of raising awareness, let's say, because we have this event. It's also for us to raise our awareness and society's awareness, to shape some social opinion, and I'll mention a couple of things from a legal point of view, but I'll try to use some clear language for it. Okay, so if I have to respond to what I heard right now, I'm so grateful to Mr. Artur Hebal for his introductory words and for certain markers, certain benchmarks, which are really important for us. And we've discussed that with the EU delegation to Ukraine and with our colleagues from EU in Brussels and other cities, that we're definitely ready for constructive, active cooperation. We're ready to sit at the table and negotiate and together search for the optimal options, the best options, doable options to finally achieve this goal. So I'm pretty sure that, of course, the best mechanism or tool for joint work is when you see the person, when you do it, like when you can talk with the person, get this bilateral discussion and clear all the discrepancies. It's really hard to achieve that, but we know what sensitive topic we do work with. When it comes to the MH17 decision in Netherlands, it's really important. And first of all, it proves that accountability exists, accountability for the hardest crimes committed during the armed conflict provoked by Russian aggression against Ukraine, that accountability exists and perpetrator can be held liable. This can be done in national courts in absentia, and there's an understanding, of course, that starting from 2014, we have this international armed conflict. It's between Russia and Ukraine. No third parties. There are no armed groups or militarized groups which are the autonomous subjects. We have Russian Federation, which is controlling the actions of certain paramilitary groups, fully subordinated to Russia and fully managed, let's say, by Russia. So when it comes to the initiative of establishing a special international tribunal on crimes of aggression against Ukraine, well, as my colleagues mentioned, this initiative, this is a Ukrainian initiative of our president. The MFA is working on that, presidential office. Basically, the working group is there as well. They help us. Civic society helps us with that, because this is a joint responsibility and responsibility of the top leadership of Russian military leadership. This is something that unites us, Ukrainians, and this is something that is supported by so many colleagues all around the world in so many states. So many colleagues cooperate with us with an aim to help us to achieve the goal to finally get this justice. Why do we need this special international tribunal on crimes of aggression against Ukraine? We need it. First, it's important at international level. We must hold a perpetrator liable against the for the crime of aggression. Crime of aggression is the mother of all our, let's say, international crimes. These are the crimes which provoke the commitment of other crimes and international crimes, and this is what we can see in our territory. So we can say that committing the crimes of aggression, it provoked the Russian armed forces to enter Ukraine, and all these atrocities, genocide, war crime. Without the crime of aggression, we wouldn't have any others. Mass atrocity crimes, what we say, yes? The gravest crimes, mass gravest crimes that we have committed within the territory of Ukraine. So the first thing, we can't leave it unprosecuted, the crimes of aggression, because then we fight the consequences, but we don't regulate the issue of accountability for the cause, for the primary cause, crime of aggression. Second important thing, crime of aggression is the crime which is traditionally considered to be crime committed by the top political and military leadership of the state, what we called the leadership crime itself. And in relation to that, the crime of aggression committed by the top political military leadership of the state, it's much easier to prove than proving some specific links between like certain crimes in Bucha and links between crimes in Bucha and some orders from Kremlin. Yes, we have to prove these links. This is very important work, especially for the law enforcement. But the result of all that may be just, very vague and unclear. So when it comes to crime of aggression, it's really easy to prove, especially take into consideration that in our case, when we have armed aggression of Russia against Ukraine, we already have so many resolutions of international organizations, resolution of the General Assembly of the United Nations, which states that we have the act of aggression from Russian Federation towards Ukraine. If you have the act of aggression and 143 states vote for that, certainly there is a crime of aggression which actually led to that act. And this is the third thing, important thing. In international law, aggression exists in two dimensions. As an act of state, when the state is held liable, and the crime of top political military leadership with individual criminal liability. So I understand that we have a state which the state is a permanent member of the Security Council. It's not that easy to hold it liable for aggression at international level as a state. I think that we have to do it at the level of holding individuals liable. We speak of the representatives of the top political and military leadership of Russian Federation. Next moment. The crime of aggression is the crime which, let's say, instantly leads to those individuals who give specific orders and instructions. It means that it actually is much easier to prove, much simpler, and it's much easier to say about specific guilt, specific acts of specific officials who have certain duties and certain competence, to actually manage specific actions. To put it simple, so when we have the head of state, the head of government, minister of foreign affairs, or even the minister of defense, when one is related to a war crime, well, it's really hard to prove. We have to prove this. Relation is really hard, but anyway, we have to do it. We can't allow ourselves for the accountability for the gravest crimes committed here in Ukraine. We can't allow ourselves for this to happen. Under the existing mechanisms, or we can't have the medium rank individuals to be held liable for it, individually or internationally, but the top leaders to stay clear. This is what we speak about when we say accountability gap, yeah? That's how it's called. So accountability should cover all ranks, all categories when it comes to criminals, because they represent the aggressor state. And the crime of aggression is the component which leads us instantly to those who are on top of the tree, let's say, who actually lead the hierarchy in military and political context. So it's really important to understand the idea of special tribunal. Its concept, its draft. This is a special criminal tribunal, which actually will handle individual criminal liability. It will not handle the state accountability. It will handle the accountability for the top political and military leadership of Russian Federation for committing the crimes of aggression against Ukraine, because it's clear that criminal liability is individual, and certain individuals must be held liable for committing specific crimes. It's obvious that this should be the tribunal which would actually cover a very small number of accused persons, because what defines the behavior of state, the use of force from a state, this is a limited number of people, limited list. How many of those people, of course, special tribunal will define that. If these are 5 people or 10 people or like 20 people or all the members of the Russian Federation Security Council, well, specific judiciary body should say that. But of course, this should not be like a substantial number of people, big group of people. This is a very important moment. This tribunal, its architecture will never be like that massive, like the ICC or the former Yugoslavia tribunal or Rwanda tribunal, because this will handle only one crime of aggression against Ukraine, and towards a limited list of people. When we can hear this question, resources, we're so concerned that we can easily handle it, and we will need relatively small resources for the tribunal compared to other mechanisms of international criminal justice. Why actually do we need this special tribunal to hold those liable who committed these crimes against Ukraine? Crime of aggression, as we said, itself is a very important act, and today we have, since World War II, this is the biggest manifestation of aggression. If you just leave it beyond their attention, it doesn't work for the justice, for international justice, not for Ukraine. This would be something that won't work for the whole world. And this may lead to very negative consequences for international justice, for international law as it is. If the crime of aggression is not investigated, if the criminals are not held accountable for it in this specific case, then we can't say anything about international justice. We need to forget it when we have such an aggressive war. It means that international justice cannot handle its functions. So I think that for the crime of aggression as it is, as this accumulated evil of the whole, as it was mentioned at Nuremberg Tribunal, it's very important for this concept that today we definitely establish a mechanism where we can hold the criminals liable, those who committed the crime of aggression against Ukraine. As Mr. Artur said, International Criminal Court does not have jurisdiction when it comes to crime of aggression in this specific situation. When it comes to military aggression of Russian Federation against Ukraine, because Russian Federation is not a party to Rome Statute, they did not ratify the amendments to the statute on aggression crimes, and we understand that the situation in Russian aggression against Ukraine will not be delegated by UN Security Council for ICC consideration due to specific reasons, obvious reasons. So ICC does not have any jurisdiction when it comes to this crime. And national courts of Ukraine on the basis, and we have representatives of the GP office, it's really good. We'd like to get it from them as well, their vision on that issue, it's important. National courts can actually prosecute individuals for commission of aggression crimes against Ukraine based on Article 437 of the Criminal Code of Ukraine, crime of aggression. But they can do it when it comes to those people without specific immunities. In particular, the top management of Russian Federation, they can't do it. Head of state, head of government, head of MFA, maybe some other members of government, because they have, someone has this individual immunity, someone can appeal that has some functional immunity. National courts, our law enforcement, they do their job, but the top leadership of Russian Federation, they won't hold these liable. So there is a gap right now. Now, any international and any national mechanism can actually ensure this full accountability for Russia for its aggression. So that's why we need a special tribunal. How can it be established? Adding to what we heard, yes, this can be an international tribunal based on the agreement between Ukraine and UN to support the General Assembly specific resolution. We can't speak of the UNSC resolution. You understand why. This may be an international tribunal based on multilateral international agreement between the states. For example, when the agreement is signed and ratified by Ukraine and a certain number of other states, and this is a foundation for that tribunal. This can be a tribunal based on agreement between Ukrainian regional organizations like European Union, Council of Europe, or both. And colleagues speak of some hybrid format. Today, we actually have all these options. We are studying these options, analyzing these. I think for Ukraine, what is the most prioritized? The option which would give maximum international dimension, ensure this dimension. This is not just something that we want. This is very, very important. It's about the immunities. It's the immunity issue. The more, let's say, international the tribunal is, the easier it is to handle this functional immunity legally, because a mechanism which cannot hold the top political and military management liable, it won't comply with the expectations of Ukrainian society. This is the most important thing. So all the options are on the table, but of course for us, it's clear that the more international this mechanism is, the better. For us, it's really important that today, colleagues from the European Union, in particular from external service, External Action Service, and they prepared this opinion, this statement on possible options to hold the criminals liable based on the decisions made in the end of October. So we really, really expect to get that opinion, this paper. We really want to find the most constructive and the best approaches, which would fully comply with all the international law practices and provisions. And of course, this is important. Currently, we have this huge political support on that process. Of course, everybody realizes that it's necessary to hold criminals liable, Russian Federation, and its crimes of aggression against Ukraine. We have 3 resolutions of PAC, and also Parliamentary Assembly of NATO, one of those we had yesterday, OSCE resolutions, national parliaments, Estonia, Netherlands, Lithuania as well, they had their own decisions made. We'll have more of these papers, and it's really, really important political message from international organizations and national parliaments. They do clearly understand that a mechanism of holding criminals liable for crimes of aggression against Ukraine, so the mechanism of establishing the tribunal, we need to find it. And just to finish, apart from the idea of establishing a special tribunal, we also have some ideas which somehow relate to this step-by-step movement in that direction, and the concept of interim prosecution office establishment, a team of Ukrainian prosecutors who will handle the investigation and handle the proceeding. In this case, we speak of the top Russian political and military leadership, to hold them liable and with the help of international partners. So somehow we will internationalize this investigation and this criminal proceeding. This is really a very important step for us, first of all, to get this proper evidence base for this to be formed, and for us finally to achieve justice. Without this responsibility, without this accountability for that crime, we can't speak of justice. We can't even mention justice as an existing notion. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Anton. So I would like to pass the floor to another participant. So possible scenarios and how we're moving towards with Europe on this way. Thank you for actually mentioning the Council of Europe and European Union and this opportunity to actually ensure justice when it comes to Russian crime of aggression against Ukraine. So establishing a tribunal based on agreement with an international organization. It's important that we have this discussion on November 22nd. The meeting in European Parliament is about to come, and Maria Mezentseva, she's a member of the working group. She's an MP. And Maria, if you do allow me, we will touch upon the European issues in a couple of minutes. So I'd like to pass the floor to Chief Consultant of the Secretariat at Presidential Office, Oleh Havrysh, please. So, good morning. I am responsible for the communication in this project of establishing International Tribunal, which will hold the Russian top management liable for these crimes. In the end of November, we will clearly notify that. We'll give the message. But we had a big sociological survey in one of the biggest European countries, and this survey showed that 76% of citizens of that country, they support the idea to hold Vladimir Putin accountable for the crime of aggression against Ukraine. First thing, if we had the same survey in Ukraine, carried out in Ukraine, we would get like 100% of people supporting this idea. And this cohesion, this unity, this is something that we have today with the national platform. As well, Ukrainians have the same opinion. They want to get justice. They want finally the Russian leadership, I mean Vladimir Putin, Patrushev, Bortnik, Shoigu, Lavrov, and other individuals taking part in initiating that aggression, for them to be held liable. If someone thinks that possibly like 10, 20, 100 people who were responsible for like rapes and murders in Bucha, to punish these people elsewhere in Izum, all around Ukraine, and everything will stop at that, this will never happen, because this will be the same as we just take the commander of the concentration camp, but Hitler and Himmler would just, stay free. This is impossible. This is impossible, and Ukrainian society will never forgive that. So we have to understand it clearly that it doesn't matter how the situation evolves, still, never Ukraine will forgive Mr. Putin and his team and his, let's say, closest friends and colleagues. So, President mentioned about it when he spoke of these 10 requirements to get peace. One of that requirements or conditions was that we need to have justice, right of Ukrainians to justice and accountability for the crimes which were committed. So all the conversations, all the discussions that it's like impossible to hold Putin liable and some negotiations to get this all is not okay for Ukraine, it's not okay for the president, it's not okay for our office, and these people must be responsible, must be held liable for it. They have a right to fair trial, of course, but they must go to court and they will be held accountable for it. Basically, that's it. And I'd like to pass the floor to Maria. Maybe she'll tell us a little bit more about what we do in that matter, because soon we'll have a big road show. We will talk to Germany, France, to the US, to UK, and we will negotiate the parliamentary members of these countries and the decision makers. Thank you. Thank you so much, dear colleagues. And I'll break my short speech into two practical parts, as Oleh mentioned. So that's what we planned to do and what was already done. And the third important part is the feedback from our international partners, because recently, me and my colleagues, the MPs, we returned from another advocacy tour in EU countries, and I have some interesting things to share. So I'd like to start with the figures, dear colleagues. Okay, we have clear number of crimes, specific number of crimes with certain consequences, and this number, 67,005 as of yesterday. This is the number of crimes, 67,005 crimes registered at the GP office and regional GP offices. So we speak of more than 48,000 of crimes against humanity, international law, and against order, so war crimes, and 19,018 against the national security. And again, this is just something that we have registered. Again, my house where I had cluster bombs coming into. As a case, I didn't register it, but this is also a war crime. On my table, I have a card, and honestly, I'm very emotional with that. These are the graduates of Kharkiv school. This school became the last point for the Russian tanks to enter Kharkiv. Since the very first day, Kharkiv was standing and protecting itself, standing against them. This is a war crime, and it's in those figures that you heard right now. It's somewhere there. But as Anton said, one horrible crime preceded all that, as it's called crime, the mother of crime, yeah? The crime of aggression, which is a repetitive crime, a crime repeated by Russian Federation. It's for the second time within the last 9 years we have the war continuing for 9 years in other countries. Crimes of aggression we have in Georgia, Moldova, Chechnya, Afghanistan, and also Syria is there, and we can actually continue with the list. So when we are handling the issue of establishing, and we speak clearly, ad hoc tribunal, and it's reference to my colleague's Arthur's words, he mentioned the bullet points. He gave us the bullet points today. With these, we concluded meetings in Brussels and Paris. Yes, definitely. Via the communication of DG Justice, European Commission Department actually is analyzing the idea to establish special tribunal. We add special word because for the first time it was mentioned in the resolution of PC, and I'm so happy that this is the third resolution that we finally adopted, and we are joined by Parliamentary Assembly of NATO, the defense bloc, which does not handle the human rights, but yesterday at the meeting they confirmed A, for the second time, establishment of special tribunal, B, the status of Russia as a terrorist regime state. And we welcome this recent important document. 27 European committees of EU states, the meeting, if we read it, title in Ukrainian sounds very patriotic, Kozak. We have this annual meeting. It is held every day, but for the first time in history, Ukrainian MPs of Ukrainian parliaments were invited to it as because Ukraine is a candidate to accession, and our amendment was considered on again for Russia to be recognized as a state with terrorist regime, and what is also important, establishment of special tribunal. What we hear, and I'll move closer to the third part of my speech, the so-called pros and cons, or advantages, disadvantages, strengths, weaknesses, and we have certain SWOT analyses already carried out, like colleagues in the working group, where we have MPs, professional international lawyers, academia, and we have MFA colleagues there. By the way, friends, quite often we hear that this tribunal, and we believe that it's going to happen, and everyone who supports it today and in future will support it, they will come into history of international law, at least something that we had breaking in front of our eyes before February 25th. We showed that this is resilient. We can quickly respond after February 24th, how stable it is, and we are sure that this tribunal will be a big red line under all our efforts. Our partner countries, and upon the occasion, just as Mr. Oleh said, I will not give specific names of specific countries because we will work with everyone. I'm pretty sure that finally we will come to the tribunal establishment. They say, asking me and my colleague, saying, Maria, what, for example, shall we do with the idea of establishing such a tribunal for countries of Africa against certain European countries? Okay, we say France. This is history. This is just one case, one crime, Russian aggression against Ukraine. So we don't speak right now of medieval history or, I don't know, 19th, 20th century history. We just speak of one case, specific case, and I'm not sure that this initiative can be supported by someone. So for us, it's really important for colleagues just to understand. Just like Mr. Artur said, Anton, it's important to split the duties of ICC in their mandate. They don't have this notion of investigation because Rome Statute is not ratified. Maybe we'll ratify it in Ukraine. And The international colleagues from DG Justice and this famous German lawyer actually sent me an email, please, Maria, ratify the Rome Statute. Please, do it. So we consider this also in the package of important reforms related to human rights in Ukraine. We managed to ratify Istanbul Convention. So it's in the package with the Rome Statute as well. Maybe this day will be there. So we actually work actively where we are in international law dimension. Okay, so we move forward with this special tribunal idea, and I really would like, so it's not for UN structures and agencies. We've seen how long the discussions are, how many states are involved in that process. Despite that, we welcome the resolution, which in fact recognizes these actions as crime of aggression. I'll inform your colleagues. During the roadshow mentioned by Oleh when we stayed in Paris, National Assembly will vote for the first time in 9 months of Russian aggression. Will vote for the document which will recognize such actions as aggression. This will help us to move in the framework of Senate and also in the framework of such resolutions and decisions in national parliaments. So, despite that, 46 countries of the Council of Europe actually supported it twice. Parliamentary Assembly of NATO did it twice, supported us, so the tribunal definitely will be there. I know there is one inside that Ms. Ursula von der Leyen and Mr. Borrell, as the External Policy Commissioner, by the end of the year, they have to present in a closed format a vision on a special tribunal. This is the inside information we have from Brussels. We communicate with colleagues. We send responses to questions which are for European colleagues a little bit confusing or let's say turbulent, unclear, unknown, let's say. We try to bring our vision and opinion that we will have here only advantages and no disadvantages. And today, the community of international lawyers, NGOs, we keep an eye on international law observance. Impunity should not take place. It's the key principle. We stick to that. And we are sure that the roadshow, which will cover 4 important states, France, Germany, US, and Great Britain. By the way, Great Britain confirmed its openness and full support at the level of the Cabinet of Prime Minister, MPs, and the public sector. So Great Britain is openly supporting the special tribunal to be established as our partner. That is why France, the very last thing to say, the very last statement, very important. I represent Shevchenkivsky district of Kharkiv. This is a Ukrainian land. This is a specific place with living people. People do live there. Every time at the meeting, people ask me, Maria, when next time we'll have humanitarian aid? Or when you come next time to us to talk, I say, okay, for 2 weeks, I will be absent because I advocate for special tribunal for Putin and his team. People applauding. People are so happy for that. And I'm sure that when we name this country where the survey was held, I agree with Oleh, Ukrainians will 100% support the establishment of that tribunal. Thank you. I'd like to express gratitude for your everyday hard work. And I do wish us all to have a lot of inspiration and to stay brave. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Maria. Thank you. And by the way, except for this official trip that actually Ukrainian Forum notified of that, the delegation coordinated by the presidential office to these countries, yes, we will have some informal meetings as well of HR activists, NGOs, speaking of the tribunal, Belgium, Warsaw, and these will be important as well for our work. And we should not forget about it. Yes, I do agree with you. International community of those who say yes to the rule of law in the broad sense, not just declaring it, but actually doing it. And of course, the Renaissance Foundation we cooperate with in the broad sense, I mean. At European continent, I am just quoting one of the messages from Anton Korynevych. The legal community do see it as a European case, and in communication with other partners, we had this message as well. Yes, it's about the rule of law, justice, important for the continent, European continent. By the way, about your African countries, my personal opinion, briefly, you understand that right now we have aggression within the territory of European continent, with other states already involved. Right now I pass the floor to a legendary person when it comes to special tribunals and justice. So we have Philippe Sands, Professor of Law in London University College, barrister at Matrix Chambers. Okay, we'll have video, I guess. Thank you. So can we have the video?
I'm so very sorry I can't be with you today for your important conference on accountability and various crimes, including the crime of aggression. I'm in The Hague, I'm in a case at the International Court, and that is occupying me. But I'm very much with you in spirit. As you know, I have a total solidarity with Ukraine in these very difficult times, and it's been a real privilege to work informally with various colleagues in my academic capacity on various aspects of the crime of aggression. As you know, when the war began, I was asked by the Financial Times to write a piece, and I published that on the 27th of February, and it set out the idea for some sort of accountability mechanism, a special criminal tribunal to deal with what I consider to be the most serious of the crimes that are being perpetrated on the territory of Ukraine, and that's the crime of aggression. And the reason that I did that is that I wanted to put the emphasis on the top table, on the leaders. Aggression is a leadership crime. One of the concerns that I had was that we might find ourselves in a situation in years to come where a number of people, perhaps lower grade people, were indicted for some of the other crimes that are being committed, war crimes, crimes against humanity. And I think that would be a travesty of justice. The accent has to be, as it was at Nuremberg, on the crime that effectively unleashed the other crimes with which we are now faced, waging manifestly illegal war. And I'm particularly horrified not only by the initial decision, but by the continuation, by the terrible acts of indiscriminate bombing of cities far away from the military front. I was in Lviv a month ago, and within a few hours of my leaving, bombs were raining down again on that wonderful, extraordinary city. So my support has not diminished in any way. I will continue to fight with passion for justice and for doing the right thing. You can count on my strongest support in relation to the idea of a special criminal tribunal for the crime of aggression. And anything that comes out of your deliberations today, and in particular solidarity going forward, you can please know that you have my support. When I wrote that article back in February, so many months ago, it never really occurred to me that many months on, it would have developed a life of its own. It is an idea that won't quite go away. I know there's a draft circulating for possible General Assembly resolution. There are increasingly countries in Europe who are very open to this idea and some who are actively supporting it. So this is not the time to reduce our support. My solidarity is absolutely as strong as it has ever been, and you can please continue to know you have my strong support and the support of so many people. I wish you well in your deliberations. Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, so our gratitude to Mr. Sands for his supporting words. So support of the initiative of Ukraine on establishing the International Tribunal, Special International Tribunal on Russian aggression against Ukraine from Mr. Philippe Sands, Professor of Law. And by the way, I just remember I forgot not just how to pronounce Rome Statute in Ukrainian, but also Mr. Richard Goldstone. Yeah, Because with Ms. Larysa, we sit together at Just Talk. We have the John Goldstone speech, but we have Richard Goldstone who supports us as well. I read it in English. Probably.
Africa, former chief prosecutor of the UN International Criminal Tribunals for the former Yugoslavia, I don't like this name, and Rwanda.
So I clarify that, and I'm happy to pass the floor to Oleksandr Pavlichenko, who is the executive director of Ukrainian Helsinki Nature Union, a legendary person as well. And yeah, I think that in the history of that organization, certain benchmarks are there, and right now this is one of important benchmarks because we made something that seemed impossible, like for the capital punishment to be abolished. Wow. This was manageable, and this is a historic moment right now. So how do you see that process on the scenarios, and like, is it possible to punish the law, to punish the crimes of aggression, to prosecute them? Can we actually do it? Thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity to present my speech, especially. It's really an honor for me after Mr. Sands, who expressed his solidarity and readiness to support the process of International Tribunal establishment on crimes of aggression. This is really, really important. And I would start with the following. What is written in one very famous book? The word was the first, yeah? We started with the word. So the word has to determine clearly what reality is that it defines, yes? And when we speak about something that started happening in Ukraine in 2014, you know, all these manifestations, we were recording and registering it together with the GP office and with Zera. One of the toughest functions was to find the traces of Russian army presence, which actually avoided intentionally. They didn't call themselves aggressor. There was no such. They were trying to conceal their traces, you know, their actions. They tried to prove that they are the peacekeepers, peace builders, what we called as Minsk process at that time, you know. Currently, looks like it seems a little bit incorrect, because aggressor, criminal, was standing like was trying to present as a peacekeeper, as a peace builder. So this was a hidden disease. Instead of treating it, it was evolving and aggravating. And for us to actually get this final treatment, to establish the diagnosis, we need to determine it clearly, yes? First, is there a crime of aggression? What it is, how it is classified here in Ukraine, what are the features, who is accountable, and how can we handle it at national and international level. This is very important. And I would draw attention here to a couple of key issues, something that we need to consider. Well, first of all, we have to talk of the proper political work to be done, and this decision should get political international support. First of all, this is something that Ukraine is doing right now, and today this process, we don't start it from the scratch. We already have, as Ms. Maria said, we already have a bunch of documents already, a package of documents adopted by important national structures, Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, Parliamentary Assembly of NATO, and this is the resolution of the European Union. And these are expected documents at the level of UN, which must confirm the political and legal mandate for this established structure, because these diplomatic decisions must be valuable enough for us to make these accountability procedures realistic. So we have to calculate properly. We need to understand how can we merge the political and legal components of the process. It's important for us for these to be properly correlated. And the legal component cannot overlap. without proper political support, this model will not function. Without recognizing the mandate of this tool for holding criminals liable, without it, this will be just an effective tool. So both are important. Secondly, ICC, as for me, has to revise its opinion on establishing this instrument. I apologize for this evaluation. I know what I'm talking about, because ICC today is taking a position that, like, this is an unnecessary institution, excessive institution that should not be established, and vice versa. It will create like certain obstructions in the process. So we have to clearly delineate the discretion of each of these tools. ICC and the new tool, we have to consider all legal opportunities for each of these tools, and for that we have also to get very specific diplomatic and legal work to be done. When ICC will say yes for the establishment of this tool, and this will be like a subsidiary tool towards ICC with a clear definition of these borders, let's say borders of discretion for each of the mechanisms, then we will have more successful process, more effective process that coming from this approval we receive from ICC. What is also important, as for me, we have another important task is to ensure that the subsidiarity principle is observed, defined by the ICC as the element where national judicial bodies actually find some obstructions when they can't hold criminals liable. So this subsidiarity element should also be defined and enshrined in the model that we actually have proposed for establishment at the level of this international tool to hold liable for aggression crimes, again I repeat. And I'm so grateful to Artur Hebel. Again, he reminds us that Ukraine has to ratify the Rome Statute. We have to. This is the condition, a prerequisite. Without it, we can't move further. I mentioned this famous book, We Can't Without. We just have to consider something that's written in these big books, and we can't just, establish a religion, whatever, It's a metaphor, I'm trying to say. But when we enter the system of international humanitarian law, clearly defined at level of Rome Statute, with all the elements of accountability, with all classification features for the crimes, we can't just pass by and create something new that we want, even at the level of ad hoc tool. We can't just ignore the existence of design documents. We can't just ignore them. So the first prerequisite that we need to ratify the Rome Statute, it may be complicated, there may be some cautions, but it should be there. If we speak about establishment, international support of this international accountability tool, it absolutely correlates and related to Rome Statute ratification. So, just to finish, very last thing to say, these are the scope of jurisdiction should be taken into account. Scope of jurisdiction for each of the tools. Scope of jurisdiction for the national system for investigation, delegating to ICC, delegating to Tribunal, non-aggression. So where it starts and where it ends, where it overlaps or somehow coincides, the jurisdiction of all these tools. And I just want to remind you that today ICC is working in manual mode in Ukraine. They don't have clear regulation, let's say, instruction or guidelines that I can tell you how they talk to ICC. When I speak of the new tool, this should be clearly defined and prepared. Thank you, Oleksandr. Thank you so much. I'm pretty sure that the former judge of special tribunals and our colleagues working in Geneva Special Tribunal Department, our colleagues in Philippe, they don't create a new religion. No, 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 they don't. So I'm so happy that you say that we have to take into account, yes, we have 2 Ukrainian NGOs, analytical HR activist organizations initiating this event. It's very good for us to stay here all together. And one of the tracks that Artur Hebal mentioned, by the way, and we had some opinions mentioned, this may be like a special tribunal based on, let's say, international institution or intergovernmental organization who had this nice day, like the Latvia's Independence Day, a holiday, and from Netherlands, we have a special mission ambassador. You know, this remote moderation, it's really good, but I really want people to stay here. I really would like Anton Korynevych to stay in this hall right now. He would comment on your words as well on establishing something new. Richard Goldster already says, take a Cambodia case and please, nothing new in this world, nothing new under the moon, as they say. So definitely the evil should stop the continent. This is our joint European history. One day in my contract with Council of Europe, they'll say not in the Eastern Partnership expert. I will be mentioned as an expert in the country, from the country with associated member expert, which basically it is. So, by the way, you mentioned references to ICC. In ICC, we also have human rights activists from international legal community, and ICC is working. Anton mentioned that this is a subsidiary issue. Yes, we can speak of that. But we can also start working with the accountability with the military criminals. As Artur Hebal mentioned in the beginning, as we collect the testimony, how the groups do work. Ms. Maria mentioned like how many of the crimes already registered. And by the way, this information is from the GP office. It's great that we have Zera Kozlyieva from the General Prosecutor's Office. Okay, Zera Kozlyieva, Deputy Head of Department for Supervision in Criminal Proceedings, General Prosecutor's Office, please. So, good afternoon to everyone. I'm so grateful for this invitation, for this chance to speak. So many important statements were already given. I'd like actually to bring some clarity. What Oleksandr mentioned when it comes to legal nuances, legal details, okay? How to investigate international crimes. So, first of all, I have to mention that since the 2014, since the conflict started, this has become a challenge for Ukrainian law enforcement. Prior to 2014, we had no investigative practice. And what was the challenge? The need to ensure the effective investigation of international crimes. For you to understand, we have 4 types of international crimes: military crime, war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, and crime of aggression. In Criminal Code of Ukraine, we have only 3 types of these implemented: war crimes, aggression, and genocide. And aggression is called the aggressive war. So the definition is a bit different from international definition, which we have in Rome Statute. Since the very beginning of armed conflict, we defined that the key burden of investigation is on the pretrial investigation bodies, but we need to refer to international mechanisms as well to consider the gaps, as Anton said, we have in our legislation on investigating international crimes. So cooperation with ICC, we started it prior to February 24th, by the way, yeah, as we know, and we told that international criminal court may actually ensure accountability, international accountability for top leaders of Russian Federation for war crimes and crimes against humanity, which are not implemented in the CC. After February 24th, these figures on the number of criminal offenses, only after February 24th, we have dozens of thousands, these already registered, starting from 2014, committed within the territory of within the temporarily occupied territory, Sevastopol, Crimea, and certain parts of Luhansk and Donetsk regions. After February 24th, GP office received new challenge. We got new challenge. We already created a war crime department, which was reorganized, extended, and expanded. And today we have a new department on GBV and sexual violence crimes. We have many of them right now, February 24th. And for investigating Russian crimes, we have a special unit coordinating all these investigations around Ukraine, because the number of episodes of cases, it's unprecedented. Again, if we speak about accountability of top officials, of leaders of Russian Federation with immunity in Ukrainian national jurisdiction, we have no chance to ensure procedural actions. Also, summoning them, we can't do it because they have functional and personal immunity. In this case, we rely on ICC. We have a joint investigative team with 6 countries in Europe. For the first time in history, ICC is then Eurojust, and we have 18 countries of the world who started their own criminal proceedings on investigating war crimes and other international crimes in Ukraine, with the principle of universal jurisdictions, and because also some foreign citizens became victims of those crimes as well. Enhancing institutional capacity of national bodies, I'd like to express gratitude. We've always had the support from international partners. After February 24th, it became unprecedented and very wonderfully coordinated. We spoke today of the advisory group on war crimes investigation and other international crimes investigation in Ukraine, which is a joint initiative of the UK, US, and the EU and Council of Europe. Atrocity Crimes Advisory Group. We have a bunch of international experts there, and all the time they work as advisors with our prosecutors and investigators. They complement our investigations according to international standards, and we also establish mobile investigative teams coming together with our prosecutors to crime scenes, and they can actually ensure investigation according to best practices and standards in Ukraine. Also, when we come to aggression crime, international jurisdiction or international mechanism which can handle and cover these gaps we have in our legislation. ICC claimed that they are ready to have their own investigation, and it takes place on crimes against humanity, genocide, and war crimes. There's no jurisdiction on investigating this crime of aggression, Russian aggression against Ukraine. And we don't have today international mechanism which would first of all give us a chance to break these immunities and demonstrate Ukrainian openness to involve any international experts. It demonstrates that we are ready to open this actual info on what's happening in the country, and we allow any experts, anybody, any of our partners to crime scenes, provide access to proceedings materials, to papers. We are not closed. We are ready to cooperate. International mechanisms show that Ukraine is open for fair investigation, fair proceeding, and we demonstrate how impartial we are. And this international mechanism is impartial. If it's purely Ukrainian, then yes, it can cause doubts, but it isn't. So today, this is the only way to ensure international justice for aggression crime and for us to hold top management liable. 2 things to mention. When it comes to definition criminal code, we spoke that in our code, unfortunately, we don't have this as leadership crime. It's crime where any individual can be involved too. So the approach to investigation, structure of the offense, elements of proved crime, it's different from international. We do require to have these top management held liable. We must hold them liable for no one to have any doubts about it when it comes to that level of crime. Secondly, cooperation with ICC. We have this work actively carried out, and we have specific chapter in CPC on how to cooperate with ICC. We amended the Article 624 of CPC, giving an opportunity for representatives of ICC to have their autonomous procedural actions carried out for their own investigation. And at the same time, we have active work carried out and to sign an international agreement on how to create field office of ICC in Ukraine and how to regulate the operational details, the operational cooperation details between ICC and Ukrainian rules. The GP office, and personally Mr. Kostin as Prosecutor General, they support the idea of special tribunal establishment. And we always say, together with the compensation mechanism to reimburse the damage to victims of all these crimes and to restore Ukraine, they should work together. During all these events and meetings with other countries in GP office, we constantly communicate and advocate for tribunal establishment, and we give evidence of these crimes to our partners, which gives a very positive effect. They respond positively, they receive it positively. They say that we definitely need to have this full mechanism for individual accountability. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ms. Zera, for this very well justified and detailed speech. For example, the head of rule of law unit of the Renaissance Foundation, like he says, it's not justified with just something, but you already have some results and you use it as a foundation. You have certain cooperation between ICC and Ukraine as well, and upon the occasion, I'd say it's very important that you mentioned this important work. I know Ms. Larysa Denysenko is involved there as well, on how to treat the GBV survivors respectfully. These are the symptoms of crimes of aggression, as we say. And upon the occasion, I'd like to remember the wonderful publications of the Global Right Compliance Managing Partner Wayne Jordash in Ukrainian Pravda. We have a question online, and I'd like to ask to check if we actually have connection. Maybe a comment from Anton. I'm a bad moderator because I took some time, but we will present this question because we have a hybrid format, and the tribunal may be hybrid as well. Questions. From which countries, courts, NGOs? Ms. Zera, by the way, you said that Andriy Kostin is supporting, he's not in your working group, the establishment of tribunal, yes, implementing this Ukrainian initiative. So from which countries, courts, NGOs, unions, security councils, forums, from where shall we get decisions? Will this promote the acceleration of establishing the tribunal and its effective work? Another question. So functional, personal, official immunity. Okay, so what kind of norm is that, where it's fixed? Okay, if it's a common law, can we actually somehow handle it? I'll just tell you that the first question, maybe Ms. Maria would like to answer it. From which courts, unions, organizations, where should we need to get these decisions from to promote it? A brief answer, we don't have exceptions. We just unite everyone from Australia to North America, South America, Canada, Europe, please. African countries and Egypt, Morocco. So, okay. We don't exclude, we include partners. So all the geography, let's say, all the planet, all the civilized world, just briefly. Anton will give the answer for the second. We just copy-paste the article of the Rome Statute, and we just detour the immunity issue. Okay, from the support from various dimensions. I had to present at side event of this investigative organization at side event of Egypt negotiation. You mentioned Egypt, and I was so amazed that they actually check. I was so amazed how Egypt changes rhetorics, you know, and the president of Egypt changed his statements. This is changing like every second. While we are sitting here, it's changing, and I would say that anything you can do, do it, but soon we'll present these special posters and banners. I'll show you other talented pieces of very talented Mikhail Skopal, Lviv artist. By the way, he is the son of famous artist, Lviv artist. So we'll have it in French, by the way, and prepare this exhibition in France. So this will be fully dedicated to the crime of aggression against Ukraine. So this is the key topic. I think that together with you, Miss Maria, I didn't even think you're from Kharkiv when I presented this first one to you. Please, maybe Mr. Artur can get this card as well. Yeah. Hey, everyone watching us online, search. I think in Twitter we'll have the websites and Hyloskopa's works. You can find these. I can find it with a hashtag, of course, on the internet. Please just try to make it viral, engage, and everybody who stands for the rule of law, the civilized world. If we want to, it's not about just some informal justice or judicial practices. If you want to keep some order in European continent and stick to civilized practices, please do it as a world, do it as a planet. Anton, do you have any comments? Okay. If we get comments, I'll be there at our second panel discussion. I do apologize, Miss Julia, that I took some of your extra time. So if we get any comments, I'll give it to you. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for this first panel. I think we will not have any organizational break. So we have a lot of emotions, that's why we talk a lot, yeah. A lot in our hearts, so a lot in the mouth. And we have almost all the panelists there for the second panel. I'd like to warmly invite those who are not at the table, take your seats. We will continue our conversation on justice, on intentional tribunal against Russian aggression. For Russian aggression, yeah. Tribunal for Putin. Crime of aggression is the mother of all crimes, yes. Tribunal to hold them liable. During this panel, we'll try to talk and demonstrate some we'll try to present the activity of various NGOs and agencies and bodies on how we'll move in that direction, how we move in the direction of establishing the tribunal, because tribunal is about the international law, tribunal is about justice, actually, and justice for victims. The figures are horrible, these are terrifying that you give us, and it's clear that, unfortunately, these are not the figures that draw the line, of course. It's not the final ones. And I'd like to pass the floor to Ms. Oleksandra Romantsova, Executive Director of the NGO Center of Civic Liberties. Again, congratulations with this important award. Of course, jointly with other organizations, Nobel Prize for Peace, thank you for your efforts and your vision, how you see the organization of this process in the tribunal, where we are, what do we need, and what cooperation is really necessary for us. Your speculations or ideas, your experience and your proposals. Okay, 5-6 minutes, yes, for us to. We just have other people watching us in Zoom. Again, this is a hybrid event, and if we have any questions, you can actually ask these, you can clarify. Please, we promote that. Thank you, Yulia. Thank you so much for this truly important event, and so many initiatives we have in that direction. So yes, that's why it's so important together to make sure we stand on the same line when it comes to the processes. Yes, I'll start with the following. Ukraine has to know definitely that this is a unique situation where we have to be not just leaders, present as leaders, but the pioneers who do it for the first time. When we talk about tribunal, for crime of aggression, we have to remember that this happened only once. It was an unprecedented one, Nuremberg Tribunal. And why I say unprecedented? Because this was the moment when people thought that sometimes they couldn't just even imagine the crimes committed by criminals, and they can't even forbid it in advance, because nobody can imagine that. It's not about like violating laws, but violating the humanity principle, you know? That's how international crimes emerged and crime of aggression description. Ukraine is the first country since that moment which has the capacity, inspiration and passion and really strong motivation to actually include in this toolbox of international justice, include this way to assess crime of aggression, because unfortunately there is no such, the war is not, cannot be forbidden as a way to establish relations. But the way Russian Federation behaves and how Ukraine is capable of showing to the whole world, we behave like that for a very long time, and this policy of using war crimes as the key method of military activity. So we have to stop it in a way that we fight for, in a democratic way, with rule of law, with compliance to all the norms, with the prevalence of democracy as a principle, not in this typical authoritarian way which can break the principle. What we need as a country, we have just to change the history. As always, we have interesting challenges as usual. At the same time, we are not alone, and for us it's really important to unite all our partners and all those colleagues who actually do see the support of justice and democracy principles as the security, going back to cooperation concept in Europe and in the world. That's why Ukraine today is actively, and our colleagues, MPs and NGOs and activists, and Minister of Foreign Affairs, I think right now I don't know, he's deprived of sleep, I guess, because he's like everywhere. We are reestablishing the contacts, and we try to move closer to colleagues. Oleksandr Drig is in Kenya right now, our colleague, then in Ethiopia, then we'll work together with European countries on tribunal issues for crime for aggression, on aggression crime. So we have to unite. We have to show how this should work, because we don't have to expect that the model, someone will create this model for us. All previous models in the history, when hybrid models were used or purely with international participation, not always these can consider first that Ukraine has a huge amount of already registered crimes, fixed crimes. So I didn't get the current statistics, more than 48,000. 67,000. Okay, this is really serious. Officially recorded crimes by prosecutors, at the same time as human rights activists have the function also to become those validating and monitoring subjects. We have more than 25,000 of war crimes recorded, which are in the tribunal database, Tribunal for Putin, and it means that this is an unprecedented number of war crimes. And aggression crime as accountability of those who made the decision in 2014 to implement this aggression against Ukraine, before that using the methods of violating customs of war in Chechnya, Moldova, and Georgia. So we have this unprecedented load of work, and in that case, as human rights organizations, international investigators, and the national system are having this unique challenge. ICC will take big systemic cases. The question is, how shall we handle all others, like thousands of crimes that are still here? And at the same time, which remain here, if we have a full tribunal process against international aggression crime, we will have this framework of accountability, which will give us an answer that leadership decisions, political decisions, top military decisions, administrative decisions, Russian Federation, let's say, like, these can't lead to like a legitimate war, because the use of war not for protection but for offensive for annexation, to violate the rule of law principle when they are not responsible for the actions of their soldiers. Officers are responsible for the soldiers' actions, vice versa. Intentional use of shelling when it comes to civilian objects, and use of not conventional weapons, deporting children, deporting civilians, and capturing these civilians. This is a unique thing when we have civilians who actually are in the status of de facto war prisoners, but there is no such even status in international law how to respond to that, because nobody could even imagine that this may happen. Again, Ukraine must do some unprecedented job. Thank God with our partners, and we have the support from European colleagues, American colleagues in other countries, but I understand how dangerous that is, how dangerous for these practices to root in, okay? So our task for these leadership opinion to be switched and presented at all levels, and finally to achieve it, to create a unique new tool, because hybrid war right now is evolving. It's like a virus in the whole world. We are not the only armed conflict with a hybrid format. And accountability in informational space, informational environment, media environment, when we have these 1,000 Hill radio leaders. And for example, where we may have this hypothetically full embargo and there's legal evaluation and this legal mechanism. Well, we have to create it from the scratch, but nobody in fact will do it, because we need it, the world needs it. If we want to live in this world, in a democratic world, supporting human rights and protecting them. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Oleksandra. Thank you for this very important comment on the need to establish a new mechanism and the description of the cooperation that we have today between NGOs, law enforcement bodies, political actors, let's say, managers, leaders. I think that this cooperation is like a case itself. A case, like we mentioned at the beginning, which is a component in our Ukrainian resilience formula. Not for the first time it's there. It's not for the first time when we need to discover something when it comes to international law and the tools and mechanisms and organization of the process. This is a challenge, but it may sound paradoxically, but an opportunity. And we have to pave this way. I'd like right now to pass the floor to Ms. Olena Khomenko, MP, head of the Parliamentary Subcommittee on Foreign Economic Affairs and Effective Use of International Support. And she's with us, by the way, I guess, in online format. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Olena, please. So, good afternoon, colleagues, and thank you so much for organizing this wonderful event and for a chance to be with you today. And the MPs and experts are with us today. It's really great. Thank you. Thank you for the chance. I'd like first of all to stress that our Ukrainian society maybe still does not fully understand And I'm so grateful for this event that's happening, actually, to raise the awareness on what is a special tribunal, why we need it, what will be the consequences. I'd like to stress, first of all, on the following, that special tribunal is the only legal mechanism to hold Putin liable, together with Shoigu, Mishustin, Lavrov, and the top leaders, political military leaders of Russian Federation, to hold them liable for the aggression crime, for actually giving these fully legitimate orders, criminal orders. In Ukrainian society, there is a demand for justice, a demand for punishment and accountability. So this is about meeting the demand, complying with the demand of Ukrainians, people who lost their homes, their relatives, who suffered from it, who lost their health. This is their demand for this special tribunal for justice, actually. And I personally do believe that the tribunal is about to be established, and I believe it can be established. I contribute with my colleagues to that process. What do we do? So we involve international partners. Also, we are active at international platforms like Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, and as a delegation, as part of the delegation, part of Ukrainian delegation to PAC, and Maria Mezentseva is the head of it, and I'm just a member of the delegation, but Maria is the head of it, and we work, we do everything for this special tribunal establishment to appear in the resolution. It was mentioned, by the way, that it's there in the resolution. The claim is there in PAC, the Committee of Ministers of Council of Europe. We have our colleagues working as well. NATO delegation, OSCE delegation, they work actively. So we also work with our international partners, with the states, for them to engage to this initiative, and for this we have so many meetings organized. We convince them, persuade them, we explain them the need to establish this special tribunal. There are some states which are ready to join. For example, I can give the name of the country because we have a specific resolution of its parliament. For example, the Netherlands, and we have countries who are still thinking. We can't give their names because it's still, the process is not complete, and quite often politicians just don't understand why do we need to establish a special tribunal, because we have like ICC, tribunal. We also have an opinion that if the special tribunal is established for Putin and for the top management, military and political, if they are recognized as war criminals, how will the ceasefire negotiation will take place? Yeah, like at a certain period of time. Some concerns like emerge, and there's also an issue of funding, because countries already make some contributions, they finance ICC, and establishment of a special tribunal is an additional financial load, of course. But Anton Korynevych at the very beginning just explained to us, provide a counter-argument that establishment of special tribunal will not require that huge amount of money. And we heard today at the meeting, and before that, we heard about the hybrid format, Chamber Kosovo that exists, but certain limitations are there as well. Because unfortunately, we won't be able to handle the immunities if this is national jurisdiction. We won't be able to break these immunities, when the head of the criminal state, immunity of the head of the criminal state and his team. So we have this constant work, it's ongoing, and we continue persuading, saying that tribunal is the only legal mechanism to hold criminals liable. The top political military leaders as criminals, I mean. And we'll establish in there this week. The roadshow starts. This will be a trip. So we'll have trips in a couple of countries where we'll take part on that roadshow, by the way, and we'll again try to finalize this activity. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ms. Olena, for your explanation, for your efforts, and for shaping and defining the needs. Yes, this is definitely something that we need, international cooperation involving various stakeholders, and about these political underwater stones, that we have on how to organize and support this tribunal on aggression crime. And in 2014, when the Crimea was illegitimately occupied, and when we had the war in Donbass, I think that if in 2014, if in the world practice, in these legal evaluations, other arguments would be there, which would not be motivated just purely with purely the political background when it comes to negotiation and this hybrid case handling, as we call it. If something else would be there, we would not have this ambiguity and hybridity of the situation. Maybe we would never have February 24th. If then, they would do it the other way. If aggressor would be recognized as aggressor then in 2014, and not, and for certain countries not to be led by their financial and political opinions. Okay, so I'd like to pass the floor to Ihor Kozlovskyi. He remembers it very well, maybe better than all of us, what actually happened and is happening in certain parts of Donetsk and Luhansk regions. He knows what's happening there, and he can tell us about Russian aggression because the war started, unfortunately. It started in Crimea. There was an outburst in Crimea, then it moved to Donbass, and it's not just about 200 days. We have years of it. Thank you. Thank you. So when we say about hybrid format, well, we need to start with the Russian world ideology is a hybrid one. It's not just about the content of ideas that are the parts of it, but it's not about just ideology. There's a certain substitute. These ideas become more than reality. They actually object the reality, and they even aim to destroy the reality. We are for them not real as people, as human beings. We are someone in their ideology. We don't match their ideas in some way. If we don't match these, we should be destroyed, we as Ukrainians, firstly. And secondly, I'd like to share my observations as a person who spent 2 years as a prisoner, and I just watch everything happening, right now. I just want to stress, there's not just cases and episodes that we collect. It's systemic. It's purely systemic. It's systemic repression. And we have to stress on that as well. Why it's systemic? Because it's not an initiative of specific individuals who commit the crimes. These are aimed not just ideologically, because their conscience is occupied with that. It's programmed by the Russian state. It's already there. It's like a program. And this systemic approach, doesn't matter what had happened, like in Crimea, in occupied Donbass, even now when we have in currently occupied territories of Kherson, Zaporizhia regions, what we can observe is that practically it's the same. They take the very same steps. It's identical. They create this specific environment. They intimidate people, the residents of those territories. They establish a system of, so they actually create this network of traitors, and those people with pro-Ukrainian opinion that try to push them out, or somehow they abduct them, or we have these arrests, or these people are murdered, again, to increase the fear, to have this constant feeling of fear. Almost everything is illegal Of course, people are illegally captured and arrested, and people are illegally held in places which are not even just, you can't even exist in those places, can't live there. Illegal interrogations. And these are not even interrogations, these are tortures de facto, and again, systemic torturing. Everything I saw, everything I've come through, it's the same thing. It's the very same scheme, the same system. It's not just about beating using electric current. It's imitation of shooting, and strangulation, just to break the person, to destroy one's dignity. This is a mandatory practice for them. For everyone who is committing those crimes. Creating the environment with these so-called filtration camps that we have today, where in fact, they don't take into consideration the gender, the medical condition, the age. Every person has to go through that camp. Everything we know. So everything the international law, all the provisions of the international law are violated. And they oppose international law. Russia is deliberately trying to destroy the international security system. It's trying to destroy this international law system. The war customs are just totally ignored. These are crimes against humanity. This is something that requires from us, we have to rethink the international law as it is today. Like, is it functional? Does it work? And I heard, and again, we stress that in our civic society and Ukrainian people have a very high demand for justice, an immense demand, a huge one. And Stanislav Aseyev asked me to join this initiative. Taira also, Yulia Payevska and other people, we created this Justice Initiative Foundation, and Stanislav right now is staying in the US. For almost a month, he's talking to people at different levels, Department of State representatives, and also talking to the public. He's talking to human rights activists to bring this message, to tell about all these crimes. For this, not just for people to read it in the news, but to see a person who actually came through that, an eyewitness and a survivor, and to present the Justice Initiative agenda. We accumulate certain funds, again with the support of the GP office and other law enforcement agencies, for these funds to be used. Again, for example, if you have some new data, new testimony, new information, for people to use the funds we accumulate to testify. To testify like on where certain war criminals are, and give this information to our law enforcement, who will, of course, respond to it. They won't waste time for the search in that case, and they will do everything they need to hold these people liable. Everyone who is responsible for it. Everyone who contributed to establishment of this horrible anti-utopia in our country. This is very hard work, of course, and we try to involve our international partners to it, those who agreed to support this initiative, Justice Initiative, and it's also important for us, for the world to see that everyone who are the criminals, that there won't be no impunity, that everyone is about to be held liable, and they will be. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ihor. Thank you, and I'm grateful for your experience. I'm so grateful for your messages, for this description. The idea itself, like if we as Ukrainians, as a community, if we don't comply with this Russian ideology, we should be destroyed. Yeah, it's like something they bring with them. The very model of destruction is, well, it's similar in various regions, you know. Creating this massive fear, this massive intimidation wave, it's about, during the occupation, they disseminate these horrible practices, Stalin practices, but a little bit modified, adapted to modern reality. What Russian Federation is doing today, what they actually are doing within those territories, where they stay occupied by it. And the issue of courts and about breaking the immunity. So survivors, they don't have immunities. We don't have immunities. None of us, you know. Any average Ukrainian citizens, we don't have an immunity against this. But we understand what our rights are. We fully recognize that we strive for justice. And certain aspects are related to accountability at various levels and victims' rights and survivors' rights. We'd like to talk to Ms. Larysa Denysenko, of course, about it, who is a prominent Ukrainian human rights activist. She's a writer, and she does a lot, by the way, in that area. She's working actively, so I'd like to get your impression, your experience, and maybe you'd like to mention something else. Thank you, Yulia. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, everyone who is listening to us in online format. You know, we spoke a lot about justice, but there is individual demand for justice. For example, women that I do represent, women who are survivors of GBV and sexual violence. It's quite different. Sometimes it's just the right to forget. The person does not want someone to talk about her in any aspect, not to be mentioned. This is one thing, one extremity. The other extremity, the other point, how people do perceive justice to physically destroy the perpetrator. This is clear. This is clear not for the lawyers but for people. One person wants this humiliation to be forgotten. You know, rape, it's about destroying dignity. It's about taking your dignity away. One person wants this to be forgotten and not mentioned, never mentioned. Other person wants those who did it. We had so many of these collective rapes. Other person just wants these criminals, a criminal not to be just punished, but physically destroyed, to stop existing. Between these two extremities, of course, we have a demand for fair trial, for justice, but I just want to stress on the following. All these individual requests for justice from people who actually came through that are really different. When we speak about sexual violence, this is one of the elements of genocide. Why? Because apart from destroying dignity, it's about intimidating all, even reads about that. Someone may be afraid for the son, for mom, for daughter, for any relative. It actually affects male and female military because they appear to be, like, if it happens, military feel that they did not protect these people. This is something that affects, you know, the condition, moral condition of people. This affects us. We have another aspect. So fertility effects, pregnant women do suffer as well, and people go to psychotherapists, and people claim that, for example, they don't want to become pregnant anymore. Women don't want to get any sexual intercourse. They just try to hide, especially when a woman thinks that, okay, when she thinks that she was protecting her relative or a child with this rape, she feels the guilt. She blames herself. She's being raped, basically. And then she just after that, she doesn't want to look good. She doesn't want to use makeup. She doesn't want to buy dresses. She doesn't want to look feminine at all. To be left alone, by anyone, by all other people. So this is a very serious problem. We as a society will try to handle that. Please don't forget, we as a society would like to get this broad justice, but again, a survivor must has one's own perception of justice, what I mentioned. If we speak about social justice, yes, public justice, our demand is of public to see the justice. It's equal to punishment. Our society perceives this justice as fair punishment. Fair punishment, it must be harsh for us to feel a little bit of satisfaction from it. There are some other important aspects. When we speak about social strive for justice, so whom do we take, we as survivors, whom do we take as an example when it comes to punishment? The leaders. Of course, Putin, Shoigu. That's why it's so really important. Tribunal against aggression, which actually allows to do it. We have another thing, maybe an invisible aspect in some way, but it relates as well to satisfying this demand for justice. Propaganda. Those people who are, disseminating this genocide idea, Russian world, which does not recognize us as subjects, as human beings, who are the subjects, who are the citizens. No, they don't recognize us as those. This whole thing is being disseminated at all possible platforms, using the hate speech in various formats and types with propaganda, with these propagandists. It's really a hard way with them. We also have to recognize and realize that we, as a justice system, what way shall we pick for that? Or either we'll prove the genocide line, yes, these people contributed to that in the genocide line, and this, I want to stress. We have the sexual violence here. We have the elimination of identity of children and citizens in temporarily occupied territories and liberated territories. We can see it there, and those who are still under occupation since 2014. Raising the identity. This is really an important issue. It requires the solidarity from all of us. Another important issue is there for justice, for public justice. Historic justice, historic justice reaching the 1920s even, In 1930s, we have the great famine, Holodomor in Ukraine, and Raphael Lemkin then saw this element of genocide. Not all modern democracies approve these decisions and recognize the Holodomor as genocide, but there's a part of historic justice here. This feeling, when we feel ourselves as a European nation, which was formed many centuries ago, and constantly authoritarian regimes like USSR or its successor, Putin's Russia, constantly someone is trying to present us as an imaginary one, or inferior to Russians. I don't want to use these narratives right now. These offensive, but all the time we have it. Apart from historic justice, we have another aspect which fits very well into historic justice. Okay, right now, if we are able, and I believe in it, if we are able to change the international legal mechanism for international law to affect the security as it is, we can now meet the demand of people in our neighboring countries when it comes to historic justice for Russian aggression. I mean, Moldova, first of all, and Georgia, primarily, Syria, then, Chechnya, as a part of Russian Federation in some way, which was affected by those atrocities were atrocities that we suffer from right now. So torturing, rapes, destroying civil infrastructure, healthcare infrastructure, again, destroying the national identity and national dignity. And I guess this is our historic challenge. And we have to understand how to handle that with various ways of justice, or the corridors of justice, as I call it. First of all, we all of us who have certain relation, to justice issues, all of us have to cooperate with national justice bodies, GP office. We have to respect them, treat them with respect, because a lot of good initiatives are there. A lot is being done. And we have to build from the scratch this trust and cooperate, actually. When it comes to sexual violence, I'm so grateful to the office staff and grateful to international and national working groups, which changed the attitude of our justice system to the testimony given by sexual violence survivors. More respect, more trust, more understanding of what women and men who suffered from sexual violence, that they may feel under protection of state and society, without stigma, without mistrust, but just with understanding the specificity of this crime, of one's experience. Speaking about ICC, I'm so sorry that Maria left, but respect to institution is not demonstrated in half. I understand what Zera mentions. I respect your work, the amendments to CPC that you promote, and signing various memoranda. But respect to institution is ratifying the statute the institution is using. We have to do it, otherwise our partners from ICC will start having questions. We heard it from Mr. Pavlichenko. Why do you create various international judicial institutions? We understand the subject. We understand that we can't, for example, get Putin because of various reasons. But if you don't take our rules in general, why do we have to tolerate that you want to create one tribunal for Putin, maybe a separate tribunal for Russian propagandists, and we have such ideas as well. These exist. But why do we have to respond to that calmly and tolerate that? Why shouldn't we object that? We feel like we are not trusted. Please think of that as well. So, this is like a psychological process that works. When we speak of the establishment of the tribunal on Russian Federation's aggression, advocacy activities are taking place. Each of us is in that kind of activity because, coming back to my previous words, for our country, for our nation, for me personally, as for Ukrainian, the feeling of justice, my demand will be satisfied when I see Putin, like in the court, let's say. He's held liable. If we can do it only by creating, in a legitimate way, creating a tribunal on aggression crime, we all have to do something to implement it. This is part of historic justice. Individual justice is there as well. And it's a great message, great signal to show that the international legal system is changing, improving, I'd say, using the principle of justice and rule of law and mercy to the survivors. Thank you, Larysa, for your opinion. Thank you for mentioning the survivors' perspective and really simple things, but quite difficult at the same time. It's about, they object our identity. That's what they do. They're objecting it. It's like an old crime, a crime that we all understand where it's coming from, its roots, and we can see in their actions in texts and announcements like coming from various Russian subjects. So we had a question in Zoom, by the way. Ms. Larysa, you mentioned these propagandists, Russian propagandists, yeah? Our audience, maybe someone from the participants may answer that. May they be held liable? How, in what way? And maybe this is like the case of 1000 Hills Radio, you know, just like the analog. These claims and advocating the genocides did it. Okay, so maybe no ready-made recipes we have right now, but like, do we have these precedents? Is it actually possible? Can it be considered or not? It seems to me that this is the part of the demand for justice. Absolutely, because this hybrid war, the war itself is quite hybrid, and dissemination of these stereotypes, this is also a part of Russian strategy on genocide and on aggression. Okay, I'll be very brief, if I may. Look, what was really weird and strange, a year ago nobody knew of these symbols Z, V, you know, that they use right now. How it worked in a couple of months, you know, just these symbols, in a couple of months these turned, this is how they turn their people into zombies, who actually approve these symbols and the orders and directions. They actually prove it. Those who create the mechanisms, they must be considered as ones who are responsible for crimes. We have to classify clearly, not political but legal classification should be there. Define how did this propaganda, because we can't call it the media, you know, it's not media, it's pure propaganda. How did they actually affect the situation? How did they affect it? How did they accelerate this process? Consequences of which we have today. And what is the personal role of each of the propagandists who are personally involved? We can't prosecute all Russian propaganda. You know, we must have individuals, personal, legal responsibility and accountability for specific actions. And we can actually pick the list of executives of criminals who were substantially involved in creating this context. And there are many examples in the history and in fascist Germany, in fascist Japan after the Second World War, and the same in Rwanda, Rwandese tribunal. This should be taken into account for these cases not to happen in the future. This must be an element of investigation as well. So we will work with law enforcement, Ukrainian law enforcement, to gather evidence as well. Briefly, evidence bases collected by StopFake in particular, on like which narratives were given by whom. This is a very systemic process. Every quote should be checked, double-checked, and verified, fixing the dissemination, registering where did it, who were the addressees, and for us to prove it, we have to recognize it clearly and understand how did certain statement affect certain people. We always have problems with it. This may make us angry, you know, and we may consider this fully unacceptable, but the legal practice is that you have to prove clearly that there are consequences, you know, that it led to something. We may work with that, but it's quite difficult, of course. But we already have practice, like in Rwanda in particular. And even right now, we can observe how those held liable who funded the radio in Rwanda, the hate speech dissemination, and we can actually see what model, we can actually pick the model, or maybe or take the genocide crime as the framework and think how to shape accusations for these people who gave certain statements, how it affected. Okay, first, we need to prove that, let's say, this statement, like Margarita Simonyan's statement, that it definitely affected and we had rapes and murders in Bucha. We need to prove this link. Like, for all of us as humans, we can see that this is definitely. How can we perceive it differently? We can't, because it's like it is, you know. For me, as a lawyer, human rights, for example, if I was the lawyer of Margarita Simonyan, I would like to defend her, saying, but okay, the person just, you know, is sharing her, like, emotionally, she's sharing her opinions, but it doesn't mean that because of her words, a lady was raped in Bucha, next to Kiev. So, and it's quite a meticulous work on how to record these links, how to build these connections, you know. But it's possible still, because history, unfortunately, or fortunately for the lawyers, there are some precedents. We can use precedents. But also shaping our own vision of it, because again, this is the element of Russian genocidal policy. Propaganda itself, it's not just someone's opinion, Anton's, Margarita's opinion, Tigran's opinion, like whoever. This is a system which is streamed from Putin to like other levels in the hierarchy, from the top to bottom. And we just have to think like what model can we use to prove their guilt? To prove that they actually contributed to that process. Thank you. Thank you so much. What shall we pick? Thank you, Oleksandr. Oleksandr, yes, I'd like to add briefly that this is a big barrier between like the freedom of speech and ensuring that the right protection mechanism is working, but evaluating this effect and when these cases are studied, we have certain indicators showing that the radius of dissemination, that this radio actually affected people there. It actually made people killing their neighbors, people from different tribes. But at the same time, we just have to realize that right now we live in a world where information is disseminated freely via internet, TV, radio, without barriers. It has much more coverage and much more effect when it comes to decision making. Legally, it should be proved, the direct connection, but we have to do it because, again, unfortunately, it's just a part of hybrid war. Not in Ukraine, not only Ukraine. In the world, we have more than 13 different armed conflicts still ongoing for more than 10 years, these last. And we've came from these diskettes to Bluetooth, just for you to understand. So technologically, we're advancing, and we have to find the borders where journalism stays a necessary function of democracy and must be protected and secured, and propaganda or show business, let's say, disseminating these dangerous opinions, and that should be legally evaluated in a proper way. Yeah. I think this is certain war marketing, something that Russia created. And this is not just, it's not even a propaganda. It's a part of this detailed system where Russian defense system is involved with certain guidelines supported by messages from various Russian officials, politicians, and so on. To me, it seems that we can prove it. It's possible to prove, but we don't speak here about Ivanov, Petrov, Sidorov, you know, specific people, you know, who are sitting in the studio and expressing an opinion in Telegram channel. No, this is a well-functioning, harmonized system, and they have their coverage, you know. So it's like a Soviet-type system, generating the messages, you know, with this regular dissemination of statements from Putin and officials via Telegram channels saying who Ukrainians are. Of course, we can actually build certain evidence framework for that as well and accumulate that. It's even much, of course, it's much broader. It's not just a couple of people sitting in the TV box and telling it to you, you know? We have Ms. Zera. We had her at the first panel, but right now I have a question to Ms. Zera. From what you heard from NGOs and human rights activists on cooperation in this area, how to promote the idea of international tribunal and other legal activities, Russian aggression and standing against the genocide. So what can the position be of the GP office? How to cooperate with the organizations? What we'll need? Briefly, but a small comment, please. Yes. I just want to say that I listened to all the previous speeches in our panel, second panel, and I'm so impressed. And I just want to say a couple of things. We all observe that unity that we have today. We do. Ukrainians' unity, people from various sectors and, people of various professions, we are on the very same line today, all of us. And of course, the GP office is open for cooperation with all NGOs. We have a working group, interagency working group, where we have dozens of NGOs presented, various, like human rights activists and related to other areas, and also not just the armed conflict. But when it comes to supporting the establishment of a national tribunal on Russian aggression, we know that the ambassador of that project is the MFA, directly, Mr. Anton Korynevych, but we also can see that MPs, how they work, and other state agencies and stakeholders, they stick to the very same information policy, what Anton mentioned. This policy is there, and they have very good mutual understanding. They cooperate with NGOs, and we cooperate with NGOs. We communicate the need to establish this tribunal. We explain our opinion. Just to reflect upon, to Mr. Ihor's words, the patterns of Russian Federation behavior, of course, we consider it during the investigation, during the proceedings. We refused from this approach, statistical registration approach. We don't just register the criminal offenses and proving the fact of the offense itself. To hold Putin liable and his team, we have to show that these crimes are systemic, demonstrate that it's the single state policy, Russian policy, and show what methods they use for this war. Those are forbidden by IHL and international law in general. No? When we speak of the Rome Statute, it's my pain. I've had for so many years. It's not just about the ratification of the statute, but the law and implementation of international humanitarian and criminal law in national legislation of Ukraine. With the National Center of Civic Liberties, we actually designed a draft law, approved in second reading, but still not signed. All the internal political factors which obstruct for these documents to be signed, And the trauma, I'd like to say, and the attitude of investigators and prosecutors. For us, it's about transformation. It's internal transformation of the law enforcement, to reorient the investigation of criminal cases. Survivor focused they should be, and they have to understand why we investigate it, to restore the justice for the society and for this person who suffered from armed conflict, from this crime, person who survived the crime. Just to finish with, on the radio I heard today the statement that we try to be humane, and our enemy, considering that our enemy has long forgotten what humanity is, but this is our victory. We are staying humane still. We're staying humans. About the coordination of efforts with NGOs as well. If we speak about the sexual violence crimes, mentioned so many times, it's important for this documentation to be joined, because there is a moment of victimization for the armed conflict survivor. These dozens of interrogations, first journalists ask you, then prosecutors, then investigators, then other people ask you again. It was an institutional problem. Right now, everyone is working jointly to handle it. And Wayne Jordash, so many efforts from him we had from institution to establish this policy in investigation process. In July in Hague, we had the conference on accountability for crimes in Ukraine. There wasn't such a case in history when so many actors and subjects who are ready to document and investigate crimes. There were so many cases in the history where nobody properly documented it. It was hard to hold liable. Right now in Ukraine, it's an unprecedented case. Everybody is documenting the international crimes. National law enforcement, national, all the partners, all the NGOs do it, you know. Everybody's doing it. One of the biggest challenges to coordinate the efforts, actually, not to duplicate your work, and to find a mechanism for each to do their job well, to get a proper common result, joint result, you know. Thank you. Thank you so much for this comment and for the coordination. For NGOs, you know, coordination issue, it's natural. For NGOs, it's natural. On one hand, on the other hand, we have so many initiatives and we have many NGOs. And I don't want to force my opinion. And you don't have to march here, yeah, like the military do usually, and you don't have to stick to certain guidelines because it's a bit contradictory when it comes to nature of the civic society. It's not a thing for a civic society. You know? For them, it's easier to coordinate. But our event, this is actually an attempt to coordinate, at least an attempt. Certain objects, like how can we communicate, how can we articulate certain aspects of justice restoring. When it comes to establishment of International Tribunal against Putin and those legal aspects of proving the genocide by Russian aggression and also investigating these personal cases that we have, which are documented, which are not. Miss Maria mentioned her house, by the way, and unfortunately, a lot of experience already managed to accumulate documenting these crimes. And our joint task is not to leave this just on paper, you know, for actually to ensure this accountability. I have a question. I just don't see if this Zoom. Okay, if we don't have questions. We don't have Zoom, but maybe you have a chance to ask. Okay. Hello. Maria Honchar, I have a question, more general question. So what are the key obstacles, potential obstacles for Ukraine on the way to establishing the tribunal? Maybe apart from Russian disagreement, how much time can we have from the establishment till the people are held liable? How much will it take? Okay, how long will it take? Can someone comment on that? Look, this is a question that is raised quite often, and there is no answer for the second one. So the deadlines, when all the criminals will be held liable, there's no answer for it today. We have to take into account all the circumstances and factors when the war is over, how, when, with what conditions will be over for each of the parties, meaning for Russian Federation and us. It's for the second question. First one, problems and obstacles. We know that Russia was preparing an establishment of international tribunal. The idea was just the idea itself just vanished in summer. Remember those cages in Mariupol where they tried to show this so-called trial for our military. This was, they tried to oppose us. This was like a counter-argument for our tribunals to be established, you know. They tried to use this idea as well for us, to oppose us and the state supporting us. This is one of the obstacles, actual obstacles that we had, one of the conditions we had for tribunals to be of no competence. the role of Ukraine itself in ratification of the Rome Statute and in preparation of legislation and correct use of national legislation to investigate crimes, which are the crimes with violations of IHL. The process of establishing it is one of the important factors. Shishamarin's case and the following ones, these are just specific examples. We have to be professional. It's a question to us. It's a second challenge. Third challenge, international community has to identify what our investigators and law enforcement, what they do lack, the element of investigation and holding liable those who have these functional immunities, and this should be corrected. Respectively, this is the third challenge. Basically, we are working with that, and we do hope that this tool will function, that it has to be established and will be, we do hope, and we will see that criminals are held liable for their crimes. Thank you so much for this diplomatic and quite broad comment on the process. I do think that we just have to pave the way, and as we pave it, we'll have clearer answers on deadlines and on the future process, but definitely a lot is handled by our armed forces today when it comes to political aspects. It's in their hands right now, so the dynamics will be really different. So just to conclude, the event may be with someone from the participants. Yeah, briefly, I'll do it. And it's not about legal aspects so much, but the therapy. So we definitely are, as a society, we are traumatized, not just the survivors, not just their relatives, but all Ukrainian society is deeply traumatized. And this demand for justice it's the demand. It's not the demand on revenge. It's not about revenge. We speak about the legal tools. We look for legitimate tools and solutions. That's why we're different from Russia. Secondly, for those who suffered, for the victims, justice is mercy. It may sound strange, but this is mercy. This is therapeutic effect. And everything we discuss right now about this tribunal, we speak of therapy for Ukrainian society. For those who actually are responsible for this tragedy, that there is a hope for them to be punished. Thank you. Briefly, international justice doesn't function as the open window in McDonald's. It just doesn't work that way. We have to create a unique mechanism. Secondly, we have these cases initiated, by the way. And ICC might actually handle these cases. Despite the practice, there's an individual approach each case, represented by Ukrainian party, and we just have to understand that it's necessary to feel the stress of establishment for international justice as part of justice. Otherwise, we will be dissatisfied. We really want to get it quickly, to get at least some therapy, as you say, yes, some satisfaction. And international justice, I do fully agree with Igor. It's about mercy and justice, about this quick satisfaction. You just have to be patient. I want to turn to my colleagues journalists. Apart from the criminal liability, which is clear to many people, it's not punishing. It's punishment, it's clear. We have economic sanctions, which are an element of justice as well. We have actually various professional punitive measures towards those people whom we less identify just as those propaganda loudspeakers, but we may actually stumble upon them somewhere. We have to explain it to people. And it seems to me that apart from criminal liability, which will be established there for the top leaders, there are options of accountability, formats of accountability, and historic responsibility for the Russian Federation, for the aggressor state. There are other options and formats as well. This process takes a lot of time. People are confused and traumatized. We have to be very patient and explain them what we're getting right now, why we don't get this tomorrow, and so on. Be really open with that information. Don't say that this will be tomorrow and this will be like that. We don't know. We can strive for it. We can actually work for it and do something. But people have to realize, all of us have to realize, this will take time. Not the open window in McDonald's, unfortunately. Thank you, Ms. Larysa. Thank you so much. I'm grateful to all the participants of today's discussion. I'm grateful for your questions from Zoom and offline. Grateful to our partners who joined us helping organize this event. MFA, General Prosecutor's Office, Presidential Office, and of course, human rights activists and the European Commission representatives. I'm grateful to them as well for their support. So we heard today what is the difference actually between the ICC and Ukrainian initiative. So we had this unique opportunity to find answers in this condensed format. So we heard of the activities that are taking place, that this would actually take a lot of time. This is not a fast lane, you know? It's a long-term therapy. And we spoke of cooperation, exchanging data between various organizations, law enforcement structures, international community as well, and we heard about the support of this Ukrainian initiative. And we realized, I guess, today, because we mentioned it, this tribunal for the Russian leaders, it's not just about Ukrainian case. It's a case of establishing the IHL system for various precedents, to have fewer of them, you know, or to have fewer precedents of that type. For me, it may sound naive, but for me, that may work as something which may prevent another worse decisions to be made by certain Russian personas. Any action may get this legal evaluation, you know, not just characterized by us, some are reading in the news. Everyone has to be responsible for one's actions. And the way we are paving today the society to establish this justice system, we'll do it all together. So I think that such discussions and dialogues, of course, we'll have more of them. Stay in touch. Thank you so much for watching us. Thank you so much for listening. And yeah, I'm grateful to Korynevych and our interpreters, of course. And it seems to me that, we heard a lot of important opinions and statements and messages and figures as well today. And that's how we approach to understanding that a district tribunal is can be a well-coordinated but still Ukrainian initiative that will handle the case. Thank you.